Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, Kushalmehra. All right, time for a book. It's been a while where I have actually had a live stream on a book, and I'm really excited that today we're going to talk about, well, I think one of the most important books that have been released recently as far as our in historical and social landscape is concerned. So today we're going to talk about Tipu Sultan, the saga of Mysore's Interregnum 1760 to 1799. And to talk about it, I have my dear friend Vikram. Kya haal hai? How are you doing?
All good, Kushal. Lovely to be back in conversation with my most favorite interviewer and podcaster.
I get very worried when somebody says that. मुझे ऐसा लगता है
You've had a ringside view of this book right from beginning, so I'm very curious to see what you'll come up with.
So that's the thing. I don't want to talk about today. Obviously, see, we're not going to give out the book. That's not what we're going to do. We're going to talk about how we discussed the book when you were writing it and when you and I were going back and forth. Let's stick to that because I don't want to give the meat out of the book. So I want to talk today about a lot about your research, because see, I was involved when you were sending me notes. I was like, abhi ye kaisa hai and all that. And I think people should know, because Vikram, what happens in most podcasts, everything is over obsessing about masala. Nobody understands the kind of effort a historian has to go through. And I know what you had to go through for this book, because I was just reading shit you were sending me. I was not reading other than that. I was only reading the bits and bobs. You were like, Kushal, ye pad, bata mere ko ye kaisa hai, bata mujhe wo kaisa hai. But the point is, I hate it when that is not respected in the Indian landscape. I personally have a grudge with it. And for me, I may not be a voracious writer like you, but I am a voracious reader. So I have tons of respect for authors in general. I rate authors to be the highest because I know what kind of effort. So let's we'll start with the research and the reasons behind this particular book. Let's start from there.
Yeah. So I think I've spoken about it quite many times, and also in the prologue to the book I write about how I think the weaponization of Tipu Sultan and the manner in which he polarizes people today and in contemporary politics. Here is an 18th century ruler who's died in 1799, 220, 30 years before us, still in elections. I come from Karnataka, which is currently ruled by the Congress, which 10 years ago, really upset the apple cart and the social order by commemorating a Tipu Jayanti. And of course, the converse of that, and you had the BJP and others naturally, taking umbrage and protesting. But along with, the politics apart, there were so many citizens groups, communities, including the Christians in Mangalore, the Kodavas, in Coorg, and you had the Mandyam Iyengars, you had the Nayars in Kerala. All these people actually protesting about this perverse move to have this birthday celebration, which in fact one of the dates for Tipu's birthday is actually today, 20th November. There are actually there are three dates which are given. One is 10th November, which is what the Karnataka government used to celebrate. The other accepted view is 20th November, 1750. There is another date also, which a historian, Nidin Olikara, he says, because Tipu started his own calendar called the Maududi calendar, rubbishing away even the Islamic lunar calendar and, of course, the Hindu Panchang. And so according to that calculation, the birthday could be 1st of December, 1751. So when this man was born itself is such a mystery and enigma, as the rest of his life is. So, but whatever that may be, I think the polarization that this event caused, Section 144 has to be imposed in the state, where more than 4 people cannot gather and celebrate. What sort of a celebration, and for whom is this celebration being done then? And in the very first year, in 2015, you had in a police firing in Madikeri, in Coorg, you had 2 people being killed in the firing. And everyone, including the Christian bishop, the Archdiocese of Mangalore, given what the trauma that their ancestors faced under Tipu Sultan, all these people coming together, and BJP, of course, naturally making political capital out of it and so on. Luckily now, Tipu Jayanti is no longer a part of the Karnataka government's calendar of events, which is a welcome move. I have nothing if individual people come and it's their view to celebrate anybody's birth or death anniversaries. It's a free country. Whether they should actually be doing it for someone like this one is another issue, but they're still okay if they did it. But for a elected government, on taxpayers' money, and when there is so much of social tensions going on in the state, to actually do this was completely vote bank politics. And I don't absolve even the BJP of the kind of ridiculous history fabrication that they also indulged when it came to Tipu Sultan, because just in the run up to the Karnataka assembly elections last year, there was a theater of the absurd for almost a month or two, where the southern Karnataka, the old Mysore region, is where the BJP has been traditionally very weak, and that is the belt of where the Vokkaliga community of the Gaudas is very strong. Today, the BJP and JDS are in a coalition, particularly to gain more strength there. But in 2023, they were opposing each other. Now, to get the Gauda vote, the BJP came up with this fantastic theory out of nowhere, that Tipu Sultan was not killed by the British, but by two Gauda chieftains called Uri Gauda and Nanje Gauda. And everything, including their photographs, I think it was drawn from the Maradu brothers, who were actually Velu Nachiyar, Queen Velu Nachiyar in Shivganga, her commanders. So you have these, tall, six-pack abs, muscular, beefy two men, and their cutouts actually welcoming people as they went to Mandya and Mysore, which is the stronghold of the Gauda community. And the absurdity that continued for weeks and weeks on media, local media in Kannada, on televisions, on newspapers, people saying suddenly they had discovered these two men. Now, not a single, Mysore history has been very well documented by several historians in the past. The British themselves, Mark Wilkes has written two beautiful, volumes on the history of Mysore. And you had many of the commissioners, Bowring and others who've written details. Louis Rice has actually written several volumes, and also the Gazetteer of Mysore. And under the Wadiyars later, you had people, historians like Haivadan Rao and others, who done spectacular work on archiving and documenting the history, based on whatever sources were available then. And you had the Mysore Archaeological Report. So many things about the history of Mysore. It beats my, wits that how nobody in 200 years knew about these two people. Suddenly, the BJP discovered through some lab experiments that these two people were the ones who killed Tipu. And it was actually left to the Vokkaliga Mutt, the Swamiji or somebody there, to actually come down heavily on them, saying, don't misuse our community for your political reasons. And that's when that story died its quiet death. So why this man? I think when people are dying today, by invocation of this person, and I live in Bangalore, and you go to several areas in the city, you still see Tipu Sultan's portraits and all of that behind auto rickshaws in so many places. He is fighting that mythical lion, courageous that he is, and so on. And appropriation. So his icons are next to Ambedkar, Mother Teresa, and so you have a pantheon of the Dalit and minority union, which is actually celebrating this person. And in the course of that, the myth making that happens on both sides, I think there somewhere I feel it is a historian's duty to actually place the facts as they are. I'm not sitting here in judgment in the book too, like I have never in my previous works, as you know, Kushal, that in judgment about these characters. They are products of their times and circumstances. My work is not to say, give a jury and a judgment about any of them. My work is to put all the facts out there. After reading these 900 pages on Tipu Sultan, if someone still thinks that he's an amazing person, a freedom fighter, a patriot, and all those things that they think, then that's perfectly fine with me. But I also provide proofs to the contrary, and I think that's what I'm leaving it to the intelligence of my readers to make discerning conclusions about what the legacy of this 18th century monarch of Mysore was.
So, as far as Tipu Sultan is concerned, what I find very interesting is that what what are the potential needs for this distortion? Like, why is he such, like, my first reaction is always like, why is he such a big figure in Indian discourse? Like, why? Like, he was just, it's not like he was a giant raja of a giant kingdom or something, right? I mean, in terms of size of the kingdom at his peak, what was the size of the kingdom also? But why, in terms, like, he punches way above his weight in terms of coverage he should deserve, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, I guess so. Because yeah, I think his kingdom covered uh, just less than half of what Karnataka is today,
Yeah.
and parts of Tamil Nadu, Kerala, up northern Kerala, which for a while he had annexed, and so on. I think the reason is very obvious. I mean, it's also obvious when you look at our neighboring country, Pakistan, which among several missiles that they had launched, one of the missiles is named after Tipu. And a lot of work around him, translation of some of his letters, his dreams, were actually done in Lahore, Karachi, and other places. So he comes in that same pantheon of Ghazni, Ghori. All those missiles in Pakistan are named after these people, right? Ghazni and Ghori and Tipu and Aurangzeb and so on. His name is even invoked in the Pakistan Assembly. So obviously, people in India who valorized him beyond a point, it was for appeasing a particular community and also creating vote bank politics. And that is the perverseness of, I think, Indian politics of the last 70 plus years, where we feel this dire need to create icons who are palatable for a particular community, and only then that community is ingratiated or integrated into the national fabric. It is really playing with fire, and actually distorting history, which in fact, in the foreword, which is written by none other than Dr. Bhairappa, who's an intellectual giant in Karnataka today. He's 92 or 93 years old, and he recounts how, while he was part of the textbook committee those days during Indira Gandhi's regime, how Mr. G. Parthasarathi, who was the head of the committee, actually has a long duel with Dr. Bhairappa, because the need there was mentioned that let's not talk about uncomfortable truths. Let's not talk about destruction, the invasions, the marauders, Ghazni, Ghori, Aurangzeb, Tipu, all these, Timur. You don't have to talk about it because that will somehow harm national integration. And Bhairappa had a long tug of war with this man, and eventually he found that he was unceremoniously dropped from that committee. So it is very, very clear that there has been an agenda in presenting the history of this country. And we've had enough and more proof of that. We have Mr. Arun Shauri, who's written in the eminent historian's book of his, where that infamous, circular which the West Bengal government had come out with, where there are two columns of Ashuddho and Shuddho. The Ashuddho was apparently it was a survey of all the textbooks of various classes, which the Marxist government under Jyoti Basu was doing in 1986 or 89, somewhere around that time. And all the references to these invasions, these destructions by Muslim invaders, that was under the Ashuddho. And the Shuddho column said, let's delete all this, let's censor all this, let's not talk about all this. History to me, Kushal, is a space which offers healing, which gives you a space to talk about certain uncomfortable truths of your past. And in India, obviously, in the traumatic history of our long history of our country, there have been several bruises and wounds. Now, getting justice for that, I mean, you just cannot after 300, 400,000 years. But I think what adds insult to injury is to deny that this never happened, and actually portray a completely different whitewashed image of that. And this propaganda that was done to present this man as a larger than life figure, I think it was a very important project of post independent Indian historians, the Aligarh, clique, which actually did that. Professor Irfan Habib has edited several volumes on this. There were people like Professor Sheikh Ali and several others, Mohibul Hassan, whom I have also referenced, and also in some places also countered on some of the erroneous, facts he brings out. And I think the way Tipu Sultan is still remembered in this country is thanks to Sanjay Khan and that serial that used to come on the only channel we all watched, which was Sword of Tipu Sultan. And so even now, that very marchy, peppy tune, the title music of that serial, is quite popular among people. And here he's shown as such a sanitized version of him, where he's seen reading Upanishads and all Vedas and all that in his court. And even that time in the 1990s, there was lots of protests about that. I think several people, the Bombay Malayali Samajam, they wrote several letters to the then Congress government, the Union Information and Broadcasting Minister, saying this does a lot of injustice to our ancestors. The Malayalis, the Nayars, the kind of tortures they faced, says it belittles all their sacrifice. And I think even Sitaram Goyalji then brought out a sleek volume on Tipu Sultan, hero or villain, and he compiled all these cases and evidences. So I think somewhere this was all scattered. There were several data points floating around. What I have done is to try to relook at this, revisit the sources, and bring out probably till now one of the most comprehensive accounts on Tipu Sultan, his life and times.
I'm glad you mentioned the TV series, because when I was reading the book and then when I did the comparative analysis, I actually revisited the TV series. I actually did that for our chat. मैं बोला मैं निकाल के मैं उसको देखता हूँ. मैं TV series को fast speed में देख रहा था. Oh my freaking lord, that TV series is so far away. He is like a martyr who saved India. He's shown like that in that entire TV series.
Yeah.
So the point is that we as a society, how many lies have we been told? And this is where conspiracy theory starts. And this is where I go back to your point of the BJP. The BJP becomes brazen enough to come up with their own bullshit.
Yeah.
Because the other side is so full of shit.
But the BJP doesn't even do it with sophistication. That is the problem.
Yeah, with the utter lack of finesse in the BJP is like legendary.
Yeah. True.
So now I want to ask you this. So for the benefit of the audiences, now again, I could be wrong. Now I know, since I read the book the first time and now I've read the book, there have been parts that have been significantly added. So, but to me still, I think the book has a premise where we start with Haider, the father, right? Haider Ali. And you actually explain his life in some detail.
Yeah.
And now I want to focus on that, because to me, and I don't know if you remember, when I had finished that bit, I had called you. I was like, damn, ye bande ke bare mein hum baat kyun nahi karte? You remember when I called kiya tha? And let's focus on that. Like, why did you decide to focus on Haider Ali? And you have given quite a bit of time and coverage to Haider Ali. Like, honestly, you could have easily skipped Haider Ali and just written a book ki Tipu ne ye kiya, Tipu did this, Tipu did this. But I don't think people will understand how bad Tipu was until they understand what Haider Ali was.
Correct. You hit the bullseye there. And of the 3 lakh words of the book, I think 1 lakh words is only on Haider. And biographies in India, Kushal, usually have the subtitle of the life and times, but people just focus on the life, which is like from cradle to grave, a chronological order of what all happened in that person's life. But the times also become important. So of course Haider has been an important part of the book. But there is also, I'm building the context to what was happening in India, and particularly southern India at that time, below the Vindhyas. Because unless you understand the politics of the time, what was the terrible political flux and chaos that India was, submerged in right after the death of Aurangzeb, and with the Mughal Empire weakening, how these independent satraps in various parts of India sprung up, jostling for supremacy, and the rise of another important power with the Maratha Empire, gaining ground under the Peshwas with Baji Rao, especially the first, going all the way up to the north. So in that context, you have these different players. You have Hyderabad, which was initially a subordinate of the Mughal, asserting its independence and becoming an independent sort of kingdom under Asif Jah, Nizamul Mulk Asif Jah. And you had the Arcot, which was supposed to be a subsidiary of Hyderabad. And these were all connected to the Mughal Empire through agreements of revenue, tax sharing. You have to give part of your revenue and so on. And each of them trying to break away from the centrifugal force, and various claimants come for the throne. Arcot, you have a war of succession. In Hyderabad, you have a terrible war of succession, Nasir Jung and Muzaffar Jung. Then there is, in Arcot, you have Chanda Sahib, a very, very wily, cunning guy, and Muhammad Ali, who are fighting for the throne. All kinds of people. And in this, you have the British and French taking both sides of the spectrum. The people like Dupleix on the French side, Robert Clive on the English side, all of them coming. So it's a theater of chaos, theater of the absurd. And obviously in a skirmish like this, Mysore also gets entangled and takes the wrong sides all the time, because Mysore at that time is under the Wadiyar king, and he had devolved all power to his commanders, especially these two very corrupt brothers called Devrajaya and Nanjarajaya. And Nanjarajaya literally, paupers the kingdom because of a very thriftless and senseless campaign in Tiruchirappalli, ostensibly to help Muhammad Ali. But Muhammad Ali is anything but a trusted ally. So I'm also painting a picture for the reader of the political canvas of that time, what was happening. And in that, if you look at Hyder, how this man who was literally had such a troubled childhood, lost his father at the age of 3 or 4, and literally in a pitiable state, and bought over by the Maharaja of Mysore, taking mercy on him, and paying off the debtors of his father who had imprisoned him, and then also promising him that once you come of age, you will get into the Mysore army, and keeps that word, the Maharaja. And 1749, Hyder enters the Mysore political firmament. And in just 12 years, 1749 to 1761, if meteoric rise, can be personified by somebody, it is, I think, only Hyder, to actually overthrow the same person who was your benefactor and take over his throne constantly by cutting the most cunning deals with everybody, dropping anyone who's inconvenient like a hot potato, the idiomatic running with the hare, hunting with the hounds that he did. And while all those other players in the Carnatic wars, in the troubled political flux of that time, came out as sore losers, the only and only person who made the maximum benefit or maximum sun while the sun shone was Hyder. And so I think it was very important to understand Tipu's life, to know what was the descent of the family. Was he a naturally born ruler of a existing ruler, or did his father have to go through all the terrible trysts of life and destiny, and be destiny's favorite child to come put yourself as one of the most prominent political figures of India of that time? And honestly speaking, I think Hyder is much less talked about or celebrated, because actually speaking, he was the one who defeated the British. There were 4 Anglo-Mysore wars that were fought between 1767 and 1799, 2 of which were under Hyder's leadership, and both of them were decisive victories for Mysore, largely because of Hyder's statecraft and vision and military acumen. The other 2 which Tipu fought independently, he lost terribly, and in the last one he lost his life too. So I don't know why, if you're looking at British resistance as the only criteria for somebody to be valorized, Hyder actually was the one who was who was victorious. Tipu didn't win anything against the British, barring the conclusion of the Second Anglo-Mysore War. He won several small wars while he was working under the leadership of his father, but independently, when he took to the field, he didn't really win anything. And probably Hyder died unceremoniously. He died of back cancer in a war camp right in the midst of the Second Anglo-Mysore War. So maybe that's why anyone who dies in the battlefield becomes a martyr. This one just dies out of a sickness. So maybe that's also another reason why he's not commemorated that much. Actually, he should be a very great case study of how cunningness and avarice and capricious nature can take you places. And there also, in fact, the serial, those who remember having seen, I think there was this very handsome, good looking Shahbaz Khan or something was the
Yeah.
name of the actor, and who had this nice beard and everything. But actually the distortion starts there, where Haidar's pen picture is he didn't even have a speck of hair on his face. He would take away even his eyebrows and eyelashes, and he was bald all through. Not a, I mean, quite contrary to a Muslim who would sport a beard or so. And even Tipu did not. I mean, he just had that whisker. But Haidar, for some strange reason, apparently never, especially after he took over the kingdom, for some strange superstition or whatever, he just had a clean shaven, and that many first time accounts say that he looks more sinister because without any hair on his face, I think his features become more prominent and so on. So if you're actually doing showing a person, a historical personage, he should look the way he actually was. So the distortion starts right from there, where you show him like this macho man, very handsome, dashing. I think a lot of women used to swoon on that character then.
Now, why I wanted to spend some time on Heather is that I will never forget that story that you mention in the book about young Tipu being taught whatever the Maulvi from the madrasa. I'm assuming that's his teacher. I mean
Yes,
that's the colloquialism that people will understand in today's
correct.
version of whatever they understand Islamic studies is.
Yeah.
And Heather makes a comment. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing the entire bit that you have explained, where he says, "This man, the Maulvi, is going to ruin my child. I need to make sure that he stays away from these teachers." Is
Yes.
that an accurate description?
Yes, yes, and he actually dismisses that Maulvi and says, "This my son will grow up to become a good mullah, but not a ruler. What is all this bigotry that has gone into his head?" So this man had knew statecraft and realpolitik. He knew for a fact that this was a kingdom that he had usurped from a Hindu ruler, and obviously the betrayal would seem, the Maharaja has been your benefactor. He has helped you as a child when you needed money, and you end up overthrowing his son's throne. So obviously the people are not going to take it lightly, and it was a Hindu majority kingdom. So he had nothing to do with the means. He just, the end mattered. So as long as he had his power, he had his dictatorial hold over Mysore, it didn't matter to him. So he always posed as a very devoted subordinate of the Maharaja. I think the only place where he asserts his independent rule and authority is in Bidnur. There is this place called Bidnur, which is in the Western Ghat area, Shimoga, that region today in Karnataka. And a most fertile, literally 12 million sterling pounds or so is the wealth that comes to him, according to Wilkes, after the conquest of Bidnur, which also he manages through terrible subterfuge. There's a claimant to the throne who he promises to support, and then deposes the Rani who's there, Viram Maji, and then takes over. And far from keeping his promise and helping that son of hers whom he promised to put on the throne, he actually casts his glance on that young boy's lover also, and she's abducted, and this guy is put in jail. So that becomes, Bidnur becomes the main source of power, and both for father and son, and that he calls his Swarajya. That is the kingdom he has got legitimately through conquest. The Mysore that he got from the Hindu ruler, the Vadiyar, was he was a Karta. The king was a Karta, and he's just officiating on his behalf. So here in Bidnur, he mints his own coins for the first time. They're called the Haidari pagodas or Bahaduri pagodas. But there also he's very, he on one side there are images of Hindu deities, Shiva and Parvati and all of that. And on the other side, the numerals are all written in Kannada. Whereas Tipu, has nothing to do with that. Everything becomes Persianized, numerals, everything is changed. So I think the contrast between these two men and what contributed to the success of one, and as a result, conversely, what contributed to the utter downfall of the other, I think that contrast is very important to see, which I try to bring out in their character, in their policies, in their rule, and their general nature.
So why is Heather? Could that be one of the reasons that even in the television series, the side of Heather is not shown on? In fact, au contraire, Tipu is shown to be what actually Heather was.
Yeah.
Because
So
that's
even
something that had struck to me. I was like, they basically are showing Heather Ali when they show Tipu in terms of real politics, sabko leke chalo kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. Haider gets the shorter end of the stick here. Though, I mean, he was no less barbaric. It was,
Yeah, those
it
were
was
people of their times.
time.
They were
Yes.
killing.
So I don't want to make him sound like some hero or anything. I'm just
Yeah.
fascinated by the fact that this man was someone can be so Machiavellian that you can actually exploit the circumstances and the situation to an extent that you get the maximum benefit while everyone around you is in loss. So to that extent, it's quite a case study of how a person's meteoric ascent can be. But you're right. I think I didn't think of it that way. That actually a lot, but Haider also was shown in a very good light in that serial. Tipu was probably exemplified much more than the father also to show, because the serial obviously was the protagonist was this man.
Now, one of the things that a lot of times is kind of escaped in the cacophony of modern day Tipu discourse is that actually, yeah, forget the Hindu community for once and their their completely justified grievances as far
Hmm.
as Tipu Sultan is concerned. I want to focus on the Christian community and their absolutely justified grievances against Tipu Sultan. Every time they keep accusing. So, yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about what he did to the Christians. Forget what he
Yeah.
did to the Hindus. When you read the book, you will know what he did to the Hindus. We're going to talk about what he did to the Christians today. So, what did he do?
So, I mean, the Mangalore coast, I mean, a lot of Christian families are still come from that area. And they were a lot of them settled when they came from Goa. And the Portuguese influence there was so intense. And most of the archdioceses, the bishops, etc., were Portuguese. Now, it so happens that during the second, and Haider had tried to ingratiate this community, gave them all the facilities to do what they want to do. They could follow their own personal laws, have their own courts to adjudicate matters of their life, and so on. And he expected that those bishops would reciprocate this goodwill. But when the British and Hyder have the fight in the first and the second Anglo-Mysore war, he gets to know that these bishops have actually collaborated with the British co-religionists. So they have collaborated. Even when General Matthews, attacks Bidnur and so on, there were reports of how a lot of money, lot of provisions, etc., was supplied to the British by the clergy of the Mangalore side of the Christians. Now, when they got to know that Tipu is going to take revenge for what they did, these bishops and others were powerful people, so they managed to escape overnight to Goa to safety. But the entire brunt of that fell on the common Christians of Mangalore, who had nothing to do with the politics. They were probably laborers and farmers and others, common Christians who on whom this entire axe fell. And so the on Ash Wednesday, which is actually a important day for the Christians, on 24th of February 1784, so many of them, they were seized, and from then on began a long period of sufferings and torture for them. And there are varied accounts of this, of how many people were actually transported from Mangalore all the way to Srirangapatna, and the numbers are different. So there are people like Abbe Dubois, Sir Thomas Munro, Hamilton, and there's the Imperial Gazetteer, which talks something about 60,000 people who were taken captives, and only 7,000 Christians being left behind in Mangalore. Others, like historian Severin Silva, he compares and says nothing less than 20,000, but not more than 40,000. So that is the range he gives. There is a very old Kannada manuscript called the Barkur manuscript, which says 60,000 from South Canada and 20,000 from North Canada. So 80,000. So anything upward of 40 to 80,000 people dragged and taken all the way from Mangalore to Srirangapatna, which is about 320 kilometers. In fact, on the way, there is a town called the Netrekere, and that name also comes because of the large pool of blood which was caused, by their killings. Pregnant women forced to walk for miles, many of them delivering on the way, and those who died, they could not even be, buried properly. Their corpses being eaten by dogs and jackals. And by the time they reach Srirangapatna, the Shahar Ganjam there, lots of diseases, smallpox, dysentery, cholera, all these breaking up. And 1/3 of them actually dying because of this. And those who did not convert to Islam, their lips and noses were cut off, and they were paraded on donkeys as a punishment. And whoever, the survivors, they were normally circumcised and converted to Islam. And there are, historians and chroniclers like A.L.P. D'Souza, Kranti Farias, who talk about 27 churches in Canada, in Mangalore, in Bantwal, in Mulki, in Honavar, in Sunkeri, all these places, all being destroyed by Tipu. In fact, the very old and historic Milagres Church, which was built, I think, in 1670 or 80, somewhere then, they also, these churches were also destroyed. It was reconstructed much later. And all these tortures, Kushal, have found their way in memory, in oral history, and also the documented literature in Konkani. There are several books which I mentioned which talk about this. Communities, some of the communities have got their surname because of they hid under a tree or something to save themselves. Basis that they get that name also, surnames. So I think that is why even to this day, and the Mangalore Archdiocese has authentic documents of this tragedy, and that intergenerational trauma and memories are, I think, extremely rife even now among the Christians, and that is why there is so much opposition by the Mangalore Christians to Tipu Sultan.
Now, I have always been trying to decipher this. Listen, as far as a non-Abrahamic religious milieu is concerned, in a Abrahamic ruling land, it's quite obvious that the bigotry is very clear, and whether people like it or not, again, my words, not Vikram's, it has, like it or not, again, ladies and gentlemen, religious sanction in many cases, where I understand. Now, why is, like, how do we, okay, I understand they were siding with the British, or they were allegedly assumed to be siding with the British, and that's why. But was there no religious bigotry angle, that these are also, after all, not Islamic, so Tipu's ire has to be kind of be there because of religious, or it was more political? Because unlike in the case of the Hindu community of that area, they were clearly, you have copiously quoted how it was basically religious bigotry, and every time we have this discussion in India on the record of Islamism in India, as far as the Mughal or the Timurids or whatever we want to call them, through colloquialism or historical accuracy, is that, oh no, it was all political, there was no religious element to it. I just don't, like, I'm not discounting the political angle. Obviously there are political reasons for bigotry, nobody can deny that. But the point is, what was the prime, like, was there no religious bigotry with the butchering of Christians?
Oh no, I mean, everywhere in his own letters. And the problem with Tipu apologists is that the problem for them is that he writes copiously. He has documented his own, barbarity. He gloats over it. His letters to his commanders, what he writes, his dreams that he has. Even there, Christians also come. He call them Nazarenes or something. And the targeting of non-believers, kafirs, that comes repeatedly. There is, so for instance, on 3rd of May, he issues a proclamation as a manifesto, and that speaks of a holy war or jihad. against all infidels. And there are so many quotes from the Quran also. I will just 2 lines of this. He says, and I quote, "It is our constant object and sincere intention that those worthless and stiff-necked infidels," again, infidels, kafirs, "who have turned aside their heads from obedience to the true believers and openly raised the standards of infidelity, should be chastised by the hands of the faithful, or made either to acknowledge the true religion or to pay tribute." So, I mean, what more do you want? This is the manifesto of his empire, where stiff-necked infidels, which included the Hindus, the Christians, everybody who did not belong to the Islamic fold, how they need to be treated. So where is the ambiguity there? I really find it. And a lot of people who say, he was just including his own court historian, like Kirmani, who talks about this with great pride, that in to establish the true faith, our Sultan did this and that. They say, oh, he was just exaggerating so that, he builds this image of a true Muslim. The very need that you feel the need to actually exaggerate excesses to prove your credentials as a good Muslim ruler, that itself to me is problematic. Why would they think in those times that to be considered as a faithful, good Muslim ruler of the country, you had to commit these excesses? So these, which is what I've, several places where Professor Mohibul Hassan, who's written a very, very good biography of Tipu, gives him the escape route like this. Oh, no, Kirmani. So they say Kirmani exaggerated. The British demonized Tipu Sultan, though I don't know. They've actually won him in war and killed him. They don't demonize either. They actually speak very highly of him. Actually, if they had a axe to grind with someone, it should have been Hyder, because he beat them black and blue, and it exposed the myth of the invincibility of a European power. At the time, the British had actually won Plassey and Buxar, and here they are in southern India, literally hovering around, scampering around. They could have been wiped out from India at that particular time in the First and Second Anglo-Mysore War. So if they really needed to demonize someone, they could have done to Hyder. But even someone like Wilkes, who's a colonial historian, no doubt, says, Hyder did not commit a single political mistake, and the manner in which he executed the war was sheer poetry in warfare, scripting it so beautifully. So, and Bowring also, again a colonial writer, talks about Hyder having a lot of respect among, though he was feared, the people of Mysore respected him because he was a brave and powerful ruler. So this demonization allegation by post-colonial narratives, that also I don't understand. Why would they demonize? So you will not take his court historian at face value. You will not take the British historian at face value. You are not going to take his own letters on face value. And so what else is a primary source? Somebody sitting in JNU and Aligarh trying to make something out of it, to retrofit today's politics and messaging. How can you not even take your own protagonists, own words coming straight from the horse's mouth on face value? I think that is deeply problematic in the manner in which we paint portraits of these personages.
What I find fascinating is that, again, you have raised a very important point. If somebody has to exaggerate, right? Why isn't the exaggeration in praise of the community that they are allegedly ruling? Why is the exaggeration always in the complete opposite direction? And then let's assume it is the exaggeration. Shouldn't the natural follow-up question be, what are the reasons probably for the natural exaggeration? I concede they are exaggerating. I concede, because that's the nature of the way ancient records are written, right? That's just the nature. I accept the exaggeration point. But can these historians, have they ever explained why they exaggerated the barbarism, not the niceness? Has that ever been explained?
No, I don't think so ever. And this barbarity is also against, when you name it there, you call them kafirs, you call them infidels, and you're gloating about So to those people who keep saying, oh, these were pre-modern times, I concede that these were pre-modern times where barbarity and ruthlessness was the norm. I mean, and even now you have it in war. Common civilians are collateral damage. Nobody can deny that. And so, but in addition to the normal violence, if you are extra violent, driven by theological sanctions, and you're using that as a means to buttress your legitimacy to rule, obviously that is much more than normal barbarity. So the Wadiyars, also the early Wadiyars, you had people like Ranadhira Kantirava Narsaraj Wadiyar and Chikkadevraj Wadiyar. They also went on campaigns, and they were also brutal and barbaric. Anybody who opposed them, their noses and ears would be cut off. This was a normal thing in Mysore. One of the early Wadiyars, they made a whole garland of noses and, as ghastly as that could be, noses and ears that cut off of the other person and hung on fort walls. All this barbarity is there. But did they go around converting people? Did they go around attacking someone only on the basis of their religion? Now when you see Tipu also, with both these communities, the Mandya Mayangars and the Christians of Mangalore, Canada Christians, not only were they picked up, they were paying the price of the folly of few people of their community who were leaders, who he had political reason to target, those bishops who collaborated with the British. Or in the Mandya Mayangar case, you had the Mysore Pradhans, the two men who were officiating on behalf of the deposed royal family of Mysore, the Maharani Lakshmi Ammani, whom they were representing with the British in Madras. Now you could not catch the perpetrators of this betrayal, so the price of that has to be borne, the brunt of that has to be borne by the entire community who had nothing to do with the politics of that time. And you're also doing this on a day which is culturally, religiously significant for them. Ash Wednesday. Why is it just a coincidence that you choose Ash Wednesday to capture them? Is it just a coincidence on Narak Chaturdashi, just before Deepavali, you are killing 700 Mandya Mayangar men, women, and children? What did the children do to collaborate with the British or whatever? So it is not as if everything was a political reason. That violence, the existence of violence, I'm not at all discounting. It was always there, it continues to be there. But when there is specific targeting based on identity, based on religion, it is, I think, a double disadvantage you have here, where obviously all are violent, some are more violent than the others. I think that thing you can't give leeway to them, saying this was a different era, so we can't judge them by today's standards. Certainly you can't judge them, but then don't valorize such people, because finally you can find good elements in everyone. Hitler also loved poetry. He he played with his daughter. He was a vegetarian. So many things like this. He loved his dog or cat or whatever pet he had. But that doesn't give an escape route for people in Israel or Germany to start celebrating Hitler Jayanti. So I think that the social report card of the person and where that stands, I think that is very important to consider.
And why is this never raised, that this entire idea that if we criticize historical figures from the past, uh, let's say if they are non-Hindu,
Yeah,
then it leads to action against people in the present today? Now, I find that deeply condescending as a person of Hindu origin, right?
yeah.
I'm a Hindu. Why do you think I would do that? Do you think I'm barbaric? That's the first question that I come to the people who keep raising this point, that I mean, आप हमारे बारे में क्या समझते हो, कि हम कोई जंगली भैंसे हैं कि हम जाके किसी के ऊपर भी गुस्सा निकाल देंगे? I always ask this. Okay, the British ruled us, there were famines in India. I mean, Winston Churchill did all bad things possible to us. Do we take it out on the average Brit today? We have great relations with Great Britain today. We trade with them. We have families there. They have families here. We have gotten over the pains of the past while we acknowledge the past. Why is it so unique in India that we can't even have these discussions? Like, uh, time and again, how can there be reconciliation if you're hiding the truth?
Correct. No, of course, there's no truth and reconciliation here at all. And that, I think, works both ways, Kushal, because I think post-independence, like we spoke about Dr. Bhairappa's predicaments, I think that continues to remain, where on the one hand, you have politics and politicians cultivating communities, and this whole Congress Nehruvian, mentality of history being used as a tool for nation building. History's role is not, to build the nation is fine, but in the process, if you are actually whitewashing the truths, I don't think that is the objective of honest history writing. That is one thing, but I think the converse is also true. And over several decades after independence of this cultivation, you have communities today who celebrate them and celebrate these people and hyphenate themselves, their identities with these rulers. I even if someone goes to the Amazon page link of this book, within days, 1 or 2 days of the book coming, obviously they couldn't read a 900-page book. You have very, very specific targeted negative comments coming from people, from a particular community, who are saying, oh, this is all bullshit, he is all against our great ruler. In Karnataka last year, I think in I think on the prophet's birthday or so, there was some rally which went on in Shimoga, where Tipu's sword was taken in a procession. There was a huge cutout of Aurangzeb, and some of the people, even in Kannada media, they came out and said, Aurangzeb hamare wali hai. So, if you are actually hyphenate yourself with these people, and then you expect the majority community who have borne the brunt, the majority and also the minority here, the Christians in Mangalore, have also borne the brunt of the excesses that these people committed, then I think you can't expect brotherhood and love. This is a two-way street. It cannot be a one-way traffic where one community always shows goodwill and another actually valorizes people who have tortured your ancestors. So there is some kind of pitra rin that you have to your ancestors, where we're not holding anybody today responsible for what these people did. They just cannot. But why are communities today hyphenating, identifying themselves with these, valorizing them? You have someone like Dr. Ambedkar's grandson going and uh, uh, showing his tributes at the grave of Aurangzeb. You have political parties which go there and do that. Obviously, he's not read what his grandfather has written about, Islam being a closed corporation and all of that. So it is, I think, a great travesty with history that we play in this country, where we manipulate it for our today's needs, and that is the perversity of it. And anybody who speaks the truth out is labeled all kinds of names. But the problem is, I'm just putting everything with facts, for no claim of mine. For it's not without reason that 100 plus pages of this mammoth book is end notes and references and bibliography. So for every claim you make, I'm not just pulling it out a rabbit out of a hat. It is based on primary sources. It's based on what others say. Now, how can you refute even that? As I said, everything is an exaggeration. So what is not an exaggeration according to people today? Only what is cooked in certain pockets, Jamia and JNU and Aligarh, or what do we consider as true history and true sources?
Yeah, it's deeply problematic, and all it does is adds to the fissures in society. Because if only we just said, yes, there was an Islamic invasion of India, it was brutal,
Yes.
it was bigoted, bits of it were political, absolutely, it was because of real politics, nobody can deny it. But there was a religious element to it. But the current people have nothing to do. But yes, I have seen people come on TV using the exact words, Aurangzeb hamara wali hai. Well, then I'm not your friend. And again, these are my words, not Vikram's. And I'm not a friend of a person who thinks Aurangzeb is his wali. I can't be friends with such people. I'm sorry. I don't give a, you know, flying F if people get offended by my words here. I I am an equal opportunity offender when it comes to my views. ऐसा तो है नहीं कि मैंने हिंदुओं को इरिटेट नहीं किया है मेरे शब्दों से. And it's not like Vikram agrees with everything I say, but the good thing about our friendship is that, Vikram knows Kushal comes from a place of honesty, and I know Vikram comes from a place of honesty, and we can handle our differences. But the point is, this kind of discourse in India, where barbarians who have butchered Hindus in the past are just simply valorized. So before we wrap up, okay, now let's talk about Tipu and the Hindus. I did not want to be the guy who gets accused कि ये तो मसाला लेके आया और इसने उसको milk किया. I wanted people to understand that no, we can do these things without that also.
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, the Hindus, I think enough and more has been, spoken about what all he did with the Hindus and various communities. As I mentioned, the Mandya Mayangars were one community where on the day of Deepavali, 700 people are invited for a feast. And this was narrated to me by a very senior scholar in Melkote, saying that all these people were invited to this Lakshmi Narasimha temple there for a feast, and while they were in the midst of their feast, almost like what General Dyer did in Jallianwala Bagh, the gates are closed and elephants are let loose to trample these people to death. And today, after 200 plus years, you have several this family which belong to the Bharadwaj Gotra. They do not celebrate Diwali on the same day that all of us celebrate in the rest of the country. That is the kind of intergenerational memory that still lives on. It's almost genetic trauma that passes on from one generation to the other. So many people don't even know. In fact, once your viewers would be surprised to know, I think Srinivasan Jain, that famous ex-NDTV person, also belongs to
Left,
this.
right, and center wala na? Left, right, and center
Yeah,
wala. He
he
used to run
belongs.
that program.
Yeah, I think he belongs to this community, and there were several others. Mrs. Tara Gandhi, who was Mr. Gopal Krishna Gandhi's wife, they belong to this community. And at certain occasions, when I mentioned this, they said, "Oh, that is why we have a different day of Diwali celebration." We didn't even know that this was what was the reason. So it's really very. So these memories are still alive. So that is with the Iyengars, which I mentioned. Again, for no fault of theirs, only because two people of that community did what was a treachery in Tipu's eyes against him. The other 700 people had nothing to do with this. Likewise, in Coorg and in Malabar, the northern Kerala had these five, principalities: Chirakkal, Calicut, Vatakara, and all Kadathanad and Palghat. And there, the Nayars were the military class, and they had their own social customs, including polyandry and so on, which was severely criticized by both Hyder and Tipu. They were almost like the social messiahs who were trying to give them, a pride of how to moral, pride. That also is done. But then, the Ghaulish manner in which Hyder also does the same when he goes there, 5 rupees for every Nayar head that is brought, and 3 rupees for every Nayar woman, whoever brings a woman to his harem. And his harem had some 4,000 concubines who were scattered across Mysore, in Srirangapatna, in Bidnur. I mean, I could still dismiss this off as the promiscuity of those times, which is okay. But I'm saying the brunt that the Nayars have faced under this person, and Tipu particularly, the terrible manner in which he steamrolls Malabar. And the Nayars never gave up. They were their military class, kept trying to retaliate and take their kingdom back. And in that situation, you had this what was called the Padayotta Kalam, or the entire war that he has against Kerala, northern Kerala, the Mallapuram, and all those Kozhikode today, these districts. And several eyewitness accounts have spoken about the tortures they faced, mangled masses being everywhere. Calicut, Tipu himself writes that 4 lakh infidels have been converted to Islam. 4 lakh infidels. Almost the entire place was ethnically cleansed. Many of the Brahmins in Kozhikode, which was the center of the Nambudris there, they all ran away to Travancore, which was the southern Kerala, where the Travancore Maharaja gave them shelter. And several Jesuit missionaries, others have written about it, how women too would be first their babies would be killed, and then the babies hung on the necks of the women, and the women were then hanged. All kinds of terrible, you have the Malabar Manual, which William Logan writes, excruciating details about this. Father Bartholomew, who writes about this. So there are several eyewitness accounts that also people would say, oh, the Jesuits were trying to demonize Tipu Sultan. But what do you believe then, if everything is exaggeration, as I said earlier? So this was what the Nayars did, and I find it such a travesty that today, thanks to the Marxist virus, so many Nayars in Kerala still probably, don't even acknowledge this, and probably bad for this man, which is the worst thing you could do to your ancestors' trauma. But one community again which faced the brunt of his attacks were the Kurgis. And the Kodavas, were a brave warrior class, and they always had a skirmish with Mysore, even under the Vadiyars. And there was a royal family that was ruling there, which Hyder tries to embroil himself in the wars of succession there and puts his puppets and so on. But they always wanted their autonomy, their independence, and so time and again Mysore invades Coorg, because that was also the gateway to the ports, from where he could carry out his maritime trade and naval exercises and all that. So there was a reason for invading. But in the process, I mean, Tipu writes to his commander Zainul Abidin Shustri that not only the captive prisoners, but also the dead must be converted, even the dead prisoners to be converted. So dead bodies being circumcised and converted to Islam. And these are his own words. Now, what do I say to that? I'm not, where is the ambiguity there at all? And there also upwards of 60,000, 70,000, the numbers don't matter. The fact that you have communities called Kodava Mapilas, the converts who came back, he would convert them and send them back, and they would cause unrest, back in the society there. And just like the other communities, the Mangalore Christians and the Iyengars and Nayars, even Kodavas, it's coming up soon. 12th of December every year, they commemorate it as Martyrs' Day, where on 12th December 1785, he invites several thousands of them, seemingly for a negotiation, to this hilltop in Devati Param. And once they come there unarmed, they are all massacred, and a mass, carnage of them, all of them happens. And that's why that community, even today, have a lot of angst against this. Several of their temples, they're destroyed, made into of garrison and so on. So in actually chapter 20 of the book, which is called The Bloodied Legacy, I actually detail both in Kerala and in Mysore, Coorg, and all these places, the list of all these atrocities, what happened, again drawing mainly from primary sources, not from anything else.
Yeah, it's page 700 plus, I think 711 or something.
Good Lord.
Yeah, I mean, don't ask me, man. I just to remember these things. It's like it's crazy. But yeah, it's a very hard read, that chapter. I mean, you have to control your anger when you are reading that chapter, and in a way, I'm also glad you kept it at the end of the book, because if you would have kept it in the start, people would not get the historical circumstances and the machinations that lead to all this bigotry, because what was the real politic involved in that, and which is why I think I was very happy that you kept that chapter in the end, personally, from a purely you know strategic perspective of understanding what the man was and what the man did. Because what happens is, if you would have kept it pehle, log usko padhte the, samajhte nahi the, and they would have taken it out of context. And
Yes.
and today's world of 60-second videos, that is a giant problem. But was there resistance, like historical resistance to him? Were there heroes that stood up to him? Because I don't want to end on a note that kuch bhi nahi kiya humne. Matlab,
Yeah.
was there some resistance from the community?
Of course, I mean, all these people, they never gave up. The Kodavas were constantly there. You had, though the Kodava, Coorg royal family had been put in jail, he even goes after this Devatiparam massacre. He goes to the royals. He humiliates them. The princess Neelam Maji and her cousin Deva Maji, his eyes fall on them, and they kind of they are taken away to his harem, and that is when actually a Mysorean who's kept to guard these Kurgi royal family, called Humbale Nayaka, he has a secret love affair with this princess. And when the princess is abducted by Tipu, he turns traitor and he allows the royal family to escape. So it's quite a filmatic kind of scenario. And the prince, Dodda Veera Rajendra, he actually rebuilds his own army. He pushes back, and finally Coorg is liberated from Tipu's stranglehold. Similarly, the Malabar chieftains, constantly they never gave up, and the Nayars particularly, the salute to their heroic spirit, the manner in which they faced this and still kept up. And the royal family of Mysore too, though they were deposed, as I said, and Hyder also used to employ terrible tactics. He kept the Maharaja on the throne, but the minute he came of age or he started having an independent mind of his own, surreptitiously he would be poisoned to death overnight. And a new puppet, a small infant, would be placed on the throne. And he would say, "I'm his servant." Now, as that little boy, became a teenager or so on, he would again be killed. And there it was the bravery of the women in Mysore, in the royal family, particularly, as I mentioned, Maharani Lakshmi Ammanni, who, despite being in captivity, through her pradhans, she negotiates, she sends the two pradhans, Tirumal Rao and Narayan Rao, they carry all her emissaries to Lord Piggott and Macartney and Cornwallis and even Richard Wellesley till the end, and see to it that after Tipu, the power is restored back to the Wadiyar family. And that's why the subtitle of the book is called The Saga of Mysore's Interregnum. Interregnum being interval or an intermission where a regular government is disposed and a usurpation happens. But then it's back to the old government after the end of this. So 40 years are all that are there of this father and son. But you have to zoom in so much, because that is also the time of the unmaking of India. Because after that, the last bastion of resistance against the British, and then India collapses brick by brick. The Marathas are weakened by then, especially after Peshwa Madhav Rao's untimely death. And so it's a matter of time before India falls to the British. So these 40 years become so important. And so though the time span is so less, I think it's historical, political, strategic importance to understanding why we failed becomes so important.
Yeah, so a couple of viewer questions before I let go. I have one might be very innocent, but a very important question. It's actually funny. Why is Tipu Sultan called a patriot? I am not able to understand this. I mean, sorry, it's a very naive question, but it's like ये सब सुनने के बाद आदमी अपना सर खुजाएगा, बोलेगा ये patriot क्यों है? इसको क्यों
I
patriot
agree.
बोलते हैं?
No, I think the fact that I don't discount the fact that this man was brave and he had a visceral hatred for the British.
Obviously.
British, yeah. So nobody can. I mean, if someone discounts that, I think you're being foolhardy. But and I think post independence, anybody who fought the British was turned into a hero and a patriot. Not realizing the nuances here. Now, to fight the British, Tipu was actually taking the support of the French, and the French were no less colonial than the British. So, if Tipu had won, India would have been a French colony and not really. I mean, we would all be, you and I and all the viewers today would be talking to each other in French, just as we are talking the language of our colonial masters. So it's not as if he was fighting for the liberation of India and some freedom fight and all that. There are letters he writes to Zaman Shah, the Afghan ruler, the Durrani ruler, and also to the Caliph, projecting that I am the true Muslim ruler. I have killed so many infidels. I have burned so many temples and churches. Now you bestow the title of the legitimate Muslim Badshah of India to me. Give me that legitimacy. Because he knew all along that he was the son of a usurper and therefore illegitimate claim to the throne. And appealing to the religious sentiments of the Ummah, you're also saying that to Zaman Shah, he says, you invade India over 2 years. First year, we'll flush out the whole of North India from Kafirs. Second year, we'll flush out the southern India from the Kafirs. And we, at the end of it, we'll meet midway and divide the entire subcontinent among ourselves and establish a Islamic Sultanate all over India. So, of course, many people could draw, allusions to enemies, your friend. And we could say, even Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose ultimately went and allied with the enemies of the British. But here, the move was very specific. Saying if Tipu had won, either India would have become an Islamic caliphate or it would have become a French colony. So nowhere in this whole scheme of things, or people who draw that comparison to people like Bose, which is, I think, quite blasphemous. But I saw certain comments earlier saying, usne bhi wahi kiya tha. He also wrote, went and met Hitler and all of that. But there was no such deal there that you come and make it a Nazi country. You were fighting for independence and liberation of this country from British. But here the outcome of that would have been something very, very different had Tipu won. So this patriot business is, I think, again, post-independence kind of a thing where always, even in popular media, anyone who fights the British is the hero. We have it in Lagan, in all these places, right? That Kisan is fighting against the British overlord. So that David and Goliath fight, this one becomes always the hero. So I think Tipu gained from that sort of imagery that was built.
Just one more question, and I'll let you go. Considering the timeline of the first Anglo-Maratha war, why did the Marathas and Mysore not team up against the British? Any analysis on the relations between US and Mysore relations?
US? No, there was none. There's this whole BS going around that he understood the American War of Independence and all of that.
That's
which
why.
is actually,
That's
yeah,
why.
maybe I assume that that's the question, but there is
That
no
exactly is the question about.
there is no proof of that. But of course, he understood global geopolitics well. So he sent embassies all the way to France, to Louis the 16th court, not realizing that France was in the midst of the French Revolution then, and Louis the 16th himself was beheaded, and his wife Mary Antoinette was executed, and all that. But after that, he calls the Jacobins, the revolutionaries, as a Jacobin club which is formed in Srirangapatna, and our freedom fighter actually sings the French national anthem, in Srirangapatna, and he's called Citizen Tipu. He also wears that hat of equality and all of the liberty, fraternity, equality that the French Revolution symbolized. So about the Mysore, the Marathas also in this, Kushal, as you know, don't come out all the time smelling of roses. And in fact, the second Anglo-Mysore war,
Maharashtra election hai bhai, Maharashtra election aaj.
हो गया इसमें आज बेझिझक हम बात कर सकते हैं. We don't care who comes to power anyway. So so the thing is, even the second Anglo-Mysore war, you had it was initiated by Nana Fadnavis, another Fadnavis who was very smart. So, so he's the one who sends the emissary to Hyder, saying, "All of us Indian powers, let us get together and push the British out." And so the Nizam, the Maratha, and Mysore, they combine, and that's how the Second Anglo-Mysore War breaks out in 1780. But Hyder takes it very seriously. He invades the Carnatic, beats the British in most of these wars, the Battle of Polilur and all that. And midst of that, he's aghast to see that the Marathas have turned their colors. And they actually signed the Treaty of Salbai because they have this Raghoba problem that they're trying to handle, who has assassinated Narayan Rao, and he becomes almost a stooge of the British. And they withdraw from the war. And in fact, there's a very telling, Wilkes talks about it, there's a very telling conversation between Hyder and his confidant Purnaya, where he says, for no reason I have made an enemy out of the British, trusting the words of the Marathas, whom no one can trust. They pushed me into this war, and I had nothing. I had only friendship with the British, which I wanted, which he tried his best to cultivate. But the British were more towards the Arcot Nawab, who was the rival. And so this didn't happen. So the Marathas, I think, if they had lived up to the very high expectations that could have come, I think, the tide of Indian history would have been very different. And I know I'll face a lot of flack for this and all that. But then this is the historical truth. I can't deny that. And as you know, the story, I let people read it. I don't want to articulate it in as many words. As I said, they don't come out smelling of roses either, because and I would put it also on the political machinations that were happening in Pune at that time. As I said, Raghoba and the Marave, Dharave thing, where they actually go and kill the Peshwa, Narayan Rao, and all that. So it's a very complex time.
I remember calling you. We had like 4 or 5 discussions on the phone on this book, and this was one of the issues you and I had discussed. I was like, "Oh boy, Vikram."
All the right wingers only will come behind me saying, "Kya bol rahe ho tum?"
No, Vikram, we have to talk about the truth. We have to break this habit of, X is offended, Y is offended. Like I've come to a point where I don't care who is offended now anymore. Like I have to talk about the truth in whatever I do. One of the biggest reasons I always, back you, people keep thinking, "Arey Vikram Sampath iska dost hai karke karta hai." No, because I admire you as a scholar. I've always maintained that. My when I cover Vikram on the podcast, it's not I'm covering Vikram the friend. Vikram the friend is when I'm offline with Vikram. That's when I'm friends with Vikram. Over here, he's Vikram Sampath, the author. I will treat him the same way I will treat anyone else. But my admiration for Vikram, the author, always remains, which is why I've always said we need 1,000 more Vikrams. So before we wrap up, so the entire initiative that you have started, uske bare mein bol, and then we'll wrap up.
Yes. So I'm sure a lot of them know about it. I've started this Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research, FIHCR. And those who want to know more details about it, fihcr.com is the website. And the whole idea here is to foster new scholarship in Indian history. One that is, as you mentioned, Kushal, based on facts, based on truth, no preconceived ideas, not really pandering to any political or ideological tilts. It is what it is. And history, it is, itihasa, history as it happened. So that is what it needs to be. And we have several verticals here. One is, of course, this fellowship, which we've named after Sir Jadunath Sarkar, where, there are, the first batch is already in there, and we have about 8 scholars there on all these people. Yes, Aarti Tikku and Arshia Malik and Shan Kashyap, Chandrachud Ghosh, Jasraj, Professor Lakshmi Arya, Professor Saumya Day, Nabarun Barua, doing a wide range of very interesting topics. And they're given a substantial stipend of about 15 lakhs over the course of the year. And the ask is at the end of it, they need to come up with a publish-worthy manuscript. So, imagine every year 9-10 extra books get out of the this foundation. Over 10 years you'll have 100 extra books. Then there is no this thing that what is the alternative scholarship available. Similarly, we also have a projects team where we are incubating it in educational institutions. Our first project is with the Nalanda University on the rise and fall of Buddhism in India. And yeah, these are the team members, and some of them are Sanskrit scholars, Pali and Prakrit scholars, people who are steeped in Buddhist, theology and history, archaeologists. These people, historians and archaeologists, never talk to each other. So we'll go back to the primary source, and whether it's in Pali, whether it's in Tibetan, whether it's in Sanskrit, Prakrit, and with the help of this multidisciplinary team, actually revisit the primary sources, and on that basis, look at the various problems of today. And the outcome would be again a book series or journal articles or whatever that would come out. A third vertical is called Yuva, which seeks to make Indian history interesting and exciting to the young people, children 6 to 12 and young adults 12 to 20. One of the initiatives is, of course, the Sri Aurobindo National Essay Competition, and I hope many of them, it's open for all the eligibility topics you could see here. I would urge people to inspire their kids to start sending this. The best entries, not only the prize, of course, a few people will get, but maybe the first 50 or 100 or whatever, we'll also publish these essays in a book. So it'll be nice to have a 6 standard. It's from classes 6 to 9. So it'll be nice for a 6 standard kid to actually have his or her essay published and to see it in print. So we want to talk to them in the language they understand, whether it's animated videos, Instagram reels, or whatever it is. High quality research content, but made interesting, exciting, and accessible for young children. I think that is another initiative. And one more is the archive, where digital humanities, the use of technology for conservation, digitization. There already is an archive of Indian music, which I had built earlier on SoundCloud. If you type archive of Indian music, there are thousands of tracks you can hear free of cost of the gramophone era, right from 1902. To this, we also want to add some more muscle where we can use modern AI technology and to see how that could be used. And this entire initiative, I must really thank the Ola group, Ola Foundation, particularly Bhavesh Agarwal, the founder, who's supported this completely and trying to help scale it up. And Ola is also having its new AI tool called Kritrim. So at some point we will try to see how that could be used for the digital humanities project. So I think, Kushal, for the longest time, those of us in the non-left, we keep cribbing, criticizing. Marxist distortion of Indian history is one favorite panel discussion in every conclave that we have. Now that ship has sailed long back. I think after Arun Shauri exposed it bare, completely bare to all of us, then the next cribbing we'll do is, oh, the Modi government has not done anything for 10 years, which is a fact. I mean, I'm not denying that when it comes to history textbook correction. But for a change, can we not crib and do something? At least there is a favorable environment today in the country, socially, culturally, politically. So instead of cribbing, let's be a small doer. I was reminded by someone, I don't know what this effort will lead to, what it will, whether it will make any change. There's this very interesting anecdote or fable or something I heard somewhere. An entire forest was burning in a forest fire, and there were two little sparrows who were going to a nearby lake, and in their little beaks they were bringing water from the lake and putting on the fire. So somebody who was seeing it, ridicules the sparrows, saying, "Arey, such a huge forest fire, in your little beaks you're bringing one drop of water and putting it there. It's not going to douse the fire. Why are you wasting your time?" And the sparrows tell him that, I know that my initiative may not douse the fire, but at least I go back to bed to sleep with my conscience clear that I tried. I tried to douse the fire. Whether it does or not is another issue. But like those little sparrows, we're just trying our best with good intentions, and with the intentions of so many people, you and several others, who would want this initiative to prosper. So high quality, good research, non-partisan, non-ideological, this one, which is the original. I mean, people like Jadunath Sarkar or R.C. Majumdar and others, they wrote with that spirit of bringing true history, which I think somewhere got hijacked with this Marxist takeover. I think it is time to reclaim that and say, there is another alternative space that exists. And that's what FIHCR is trying to do.
Yeah, and I'm really proud of the fact that you've started this initiative. It is one of the things that, for the record, he did not even know I was going to talk about it. He has never told me anything. We don't even discuss what we are going to talk when we go on the podcast. I just tell him you're coming. He comes, and then we just talk. So it was all me. I decided to talk about it, and I wanted to promote it. So once again, to all of you who are serious about these things, as you know, at least on this platform, we do serious work. We don't do sensationalism. I have tried to cultivate in my own little way on the Cārvāka podcast this culture of being serious, which is why sometimes I take a lot of time to cover a book, is because I just don't cover it until I don't read it. And I'm so glad that Vikram has taken up this task. There are a lot of good scholars who are writing a lot of good work, and Vikram is mentoring many others too, and this is very important. So if you want to be part of something like this, do join it, and try and understand the value of the kind of work people like Vikram do. Like, just to produce a book like this, I know the kind of trouble Vikram had to go through. I know what he has to go through emotionally, mentally, the kind of stress you have to go through, because it is, see, at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, आप लोग तो ये बुक खरीदोगे पढ़ोगे, नेक तो किसी और की ऑन द लाइन होती है जब भी वो अपना थॉट्स लगाता है. जब मैं पॉडकास्ट पे अगर कुछ बोलता हूँ, इट्स माय नेक ऑन द लाइन. व्हेन विक्रम राइट्स अ बुक, इट्स विक्रम्स नेक ऑन द लाइन, whether we like it or not. It is always that. And that too, for what? For speaking the truth. So the least all of you can do, is buy this book. Each and every one of you, I want you, as soon as you listen to this, whether it's on Kindle, because the Kindle version is also available, the hardcover is also available, go buy this book. Let me know when you buy it. Let Vikram know when you buy it. And Vikram, once again, thank you very much for everything that you do, brother. And it's always been a pleasure to be your friend, and to also be a reader of your work. So once again, thanks a lot, bro.
Thank you so much, Kushal. Thanks a lot. Thank you to
all,
everyone.
all right, guys, we'll wrap it up. Once again, the details, the link to the book is in the description. Vikram's X handle is in the description. You can follow him on X. You can buy the book. I insist, each and every one of you. And as far as the Cārvāka podcast is concerned, this podcast is a member driven enterprise. Don't do company reads on this podcast, because I believe in intellectual freedom, which is why I'm free from all of this. So if you can do support this podcast and the membership program, if you want to buy my book, you can buy my book also. And if you can't do anything, the least you can do is like this video, subscribe to the channel, and if you're an audio listener, leave a rating on the audio platform of your choice. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, namaste, take care, bye.